Imagine waking up to headlines that say, China just cut off the world's lifeline to rare earth minerals. For most people, that might sound technical, maybe even boring. But here's the shocking truth: rare earths are the invisible backbone of modern life. From the smartphone in your hand, to the electric car parked on your street, to the fighter jets and missile systems that protect nations, these minerals are everywhere. And now, with rising tensions between Washington and Beijing, China has decided to pull one of its most powerful levers, tightening control over rare earth exports. This isn't just an economic decision, it's a geopolitical weapon. Why? Because China controls nearly 60 to 70% of the world's production and refining capacity. That means if Beijing wants to squeeze supply, prices skyrocket, industries scramble, and militaries worry. In other words, if rare earths stop flowing, America's technological edge and even national security could be put to the test. The question we need to ask right now is simple but urgent. Is the U.S. military prepared for a world where China shuts the tap? Or will America find itself vulnerable in ways it never imagined? To really understand what's happening, let's rewind for a moment. Rare earth elements, like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, aren't actually rare in nature. What makes them rare is how difficult and expensive they are to extract and refine. Over the past 3 decades, China has built an almost unshakable monopoly in this industry. While the US and other countries once had active mines, environmental costs and economic competition from China forced many of them to shut down. Today, the United States depends on China for the majority of its rare earth imports. That's not just an economic problem, it's a strategic vulnerability. Now, add in the current climate, escalating trade disputes, competition over Taiwan, and growing mistrust between the world's 2 biggest powers. In this environment, Beijing knows exactly how much leverage it holds. By restricting rare earth exports, China isn't just playing hardball. It's signaling to Washington and the world that it has the power to disrupt supply chains at the flick of a switch. And here's why this matters now: America's military hardware, from precision-guided missiles to advanced radar systems, relies heavily on these elements. Without them, production slows, costs rise, and readiness could suffer. That's why this isn't just an economic headline. It's a story about power, vulnerability, and the future of global security. Number 1. Rare earths are the hidden engine of U.S. military technology. Rare earth elements might sound like something tucked away in a dusty chemistry textbook, but in reality, they are the quiet power source behind modern warfare. Nowhere is this more evident than in the U.S. military. The most advanced fighter jet in the world, the F-35 Lightning II, is practically built on rare earths. It requires hundreds of pounds of specialized materials like neodymium and dysprosium, which are used to create high-performance magnets. These magnets are not just optional parts. They're the heartbeat of the jet's propulsion, navigation, and weapons systems. Without them, the jet cannot fly at full capacity, track enemies effectively, or fire with precision. And it's not just the F-35. Tanks, submarines, drones, night vision goggles, laser targeting systems, and even basic communication gear all depend on rare earth components. They make engines lighter, weapons more accurate, and sensors more reliable. In short, they are the glue that holds advanced defense technology together. Now, here's the catch: the U.S. military doesn't make its own rare earths at scale. Instead, it relies on global supply chains that run straight through China. So if Beijing restricts or even slows exports, it's not just consumer electronics or electric vehicles that take a hit. It's America's ability to maintain and upgrade its arsenal. Imagine the Pentagon planning to build 100 new fighter jets, but suddenly, the rare earth shipments are delayed for 6 months. That doesn't just cause frustration. It directly impacts national defense readiness. In the world of geopolitics, where timing can decide the outcome of conflicts, supply disruptions could leave the U.S. flat-footed. This is why analysts call rare earths a strategic choke point. They aren't flashy weapons, but they're what make flashy weapons work. And right now, China has its hand on the valve. If Beijing chooses to tighten that grip, the U.S. could find its most advanced military tools suddenly vulnerable, not because of a battlefield defeat, but because of a supply chain weakness. That's a sobering reality for the world's strongest military power. Number 2. China has used rare earths as a weapon before. If anyone doubts whether China would actually use rare earths as a weapon, history has already given us a preview. Back in 2010, a territorial dispute broke out between China and Japan over a group of tiny islands in the East China Sea. On the surface, this was a fight over fishing rights and sovereignty, but behind the scenes, Beijing had a powerful card to play. Japan was the world's biggest importer of rare earths at the time, and China was the main supplier. So, when tensions flared, China quietly restricted exports. The result was immediate chaos. Prices for rare earths shot up by more than 700% in just a few months. Japanese industries, especially its advanced tech and automotive sectors, scrambled to secure supplies. Panic spread to global markets, and countries around the world realized just how much power China held. Beijing never had to fire a shot. By controlling exports, it showed the world that rare earths could be used as a political and economic weapon. That episode was more than a decade ago, but its lesson still echoes today. Now fast forward to the present. US-China tensions are far greater than China-Japan tensions ever were. We're not just talking about fishing disputes, we're talking about Taiwan trade wars and two superpowers vying for global influence. In that context, the temptation for Beijing to once again reach for the rare earth lever is stronger than ever. If China could rattle Japan in 2010, imagine what kind of message it could send to Washington today. A sudden restriction of exports could spook defense contractors, delay Pentagon projects, and even ripple across consumer industries that rely on the same minerals. And here's the key: China doesn't even have to cut off supply completely. Just announcing tighter regulations or slowing down shipments could cause prices to skyrocket and investors to panic. That alone creates leverage, because it reminds Washington of its dependence. In strategic terms, it's like holding a trump card. You don't always need to play it, but everyone knows you have it. That knowledge alone changes the game. For the US military, this means living with uncertainty. Even the possibility of a cutoff forces defense planners to think twice, and that hesitation is exactly the kind of advantage Beijing wants. The 2010 playbook showed the world what's possible. Today, the stakes are far higher, and the warning is crystal clear: rare earths aren't just minerals. They're a tool of statecraft. Number 3, the US is trying to fight back, but it's an uphill battle. The United States knows it has a problem. For years, analysts, lawmakers, and even military officials have warned that depending on China for rare earths is a dangerous gamble. That's why Washington has been scrambling to rebuild its own supply chain. But here's the reality. Breaking free from China's grip isn't just about digging minerals out of the ground. It's about creating an entire industrial ecosystem, mining, processing, refining, and manufacturing, that can compete with the world's largest producer. And that's a tall order. Take Mountain Pass Mine in California, for example. Once the world's leading producer of rare earths, it shut down in the early 2000s because it couldn't compete with China's low costs and lax environmental standards. In recent years, the mine has restarted, producing raw materials again. But there's a catch: most of what it extracts still has to be shipped to China for processing. That means the US is mining the minerals, but still sending them into China's supply chain to get the usable final product. In other words, the dependency isn't broken. It's just shifted around. The US government is now investing heavily to change that. The Pentagon has poured money into rare earth separation and magnet manufacturing projects, hoping to create a domestic industry. There's also a push for recycling, finding ways to recover rare earths from old electronics and military equipment. This could reduce dependence on fresh imports. But recycling on a meaningful scale requires infrastructure that doesn't fully exist yet. And even if the US manages to rebuild a complete supply chain, it won't happen overnight. Experts say it could take 5 to 10 years before America has a fully independent system capable of meeting defense needs. That's a long time in the world of geopolitics. If a crisis with China erupted tomorrow, Washington couldn't just flip a switch and make itself independent. That's why many see this as America's race against time. It has the resources and technology to eventually catch up, but right now it's still playing defense. The challenge is keeping momentum and funding alive, because building this kind of industry isn't cheap, and it's not politically glamorous. Rare earths don't win elections, but without them, the weapons that defend democracy don't work. Number 4. And allies are stepping into the game. America isn't fighting this battle alone. Allies like Australia and Canada are stepping into the rare earth race, and their role may be crucial in easing U.S. dependence on China. Both countries have significant deposits of rare earth minerals, and unlike China, they operate under transparent, stable, and cooperative governments that Washington can trust. But the question is, can they scale up production fast enough to make a real difference? Australia is already one of the world's largest producers outside of China. Its company Lynas Rare Earths operates mines and processing facilities that directly supply markets in Japan and the US. In fact, Lynas is the only non-Chinese company that has a significant capacity to refine rare earths on a commercial scale. That makes Australia not just a friendly partner, but a vital lifeline in a crisis. The US government has recognized this and is working closely with Canberra to strengthen supply chain cooperation. Canada, meanwhile, holds enormous potential. Its northern territories are rich in rare earth deposits, and several projects are in development. The Canadian government has also labeled rare earths as a critical mineral, signaling that it wants to play a larger role in this industry. With strong political ties to Washington and a shared commitment to NATO defense, Canada could emerge as a reliable supplier for U.S. military needs. But again, scaling up isn't easy. Mining rare earths requires massive investment, and refining them is even harder. Environmental concerns can slow projects, and global demand is already high, meaning new mines and facilities often take years to bring online. Still, the involvement of allies adds an important dimension. It spreads out risk. If China suddenly cuts supply, the U.S. doesn't have to rely on itself alone. It can turn to trusted partners who share its strategic interests. This is where geopolitics meets economics. Building a rare earth alliance isn't just about minerals. It's about strengthening the network of countries that can collectively resist Chinese pressure. For the U.S., that means turning rare earths into a diplomatic tool as well as a military one. Washington knows it can't do this alone, and allies like Australia and Canada are proving that cooperation may be just as important as competition. If China controls the rare earths, the West's answer may be to create a coalition of nations that ensures those minerals never become a single point of failure again. Number 5. The bigger picture is about leverage. At the heart of this rare earth standoff lies a bigger question: how much leverage does China really have, and how far is it willing to use it? The truth is, Beijing doesn't need to slam the door shut completely to make its point. Even small, calculated restrictions can create shockwaves across global markets. Think of it like tapping the brakes on a highway. The ripple effect causes everyone behind to slow down, panic, and swerve. That's the power of rare earths in China's hands. For Beijing, this is less about minerals and more about messaging. It's a way of reminding Washington and the rest of the world that power in the 21st century isn't just about military force. It's about controlling supply chains, shaping markets, and wielding economic influence as a strategic weapon. Every time China hints at new export rules or announces tighter inspections, investors get nervous, prices jump, and governments start talking about critical mineral security. That fear alone gives Beijing bargaining power in other areas, whether it's trade negotiations, technology disputes, or territorial conflicts. From a U.S. perspective, this creates a constant sense of vulnerability. The Pentagon might not know whether its next shipment of rare earth magnets will arrive on time, and defense contractors may be forced to factor in delays or rising costs. Even if the minerals eventually arrive, the uncertainty itself is destabilizing. It forces Washington to plan defensively, to hedge bets, and to accept that China has a card it can always play. Some experts argue that China may hesitate to fully weaponize rare earths because it also relies on revenue from exports. That's true, but remember, in 2010, it wasn't afraid to squeeze Japan even if it hurt short-term profits. For Beijing, rare earths are not just a business, they are a lever of statecraft. And in a high-stakes confrontation with the U.S., political and strategic goals could easily outweigh economic ones. This is why rare earths are often called the oil of the 21st century. Just as oil shaped geopolitics in the last century, rare earths may define power dynamics in this one. Whoever controls them doesn't just control a resource, they control the pace of technological progress and military innovation. That's the kind of leverage that reshapes the balance of power. And for now, China holds the upper hand, with the US and its allies racing to catch up before it's too late. So, is the US military at risk from China's rare earth crackdown? The honest answer is yes, at least in the short term. America has the resources and innovation to eventually reduce its dependence, but right now, Beijing holds the upper hand. This story is about much more than minerals. It's about how supply chains shape power, and how the tools of tomorrow's wars are being fought not just on battlefields, but in markets and mines. As tensions continue to grow, one thing is certain: the scramble for rare earth independence has only just begun, and the world will be watching every move.